This is Sarah Heredia, and you are listening to the Freely You podcast. Our time together is meant to inspire you to think bigger and empower you to live your life in a way that makes you proud to be you. I believe that the only box you should fit in is the one that you build for yourself, and I'm here to help you lay the foundation. My journey has taught me that we all deserve to create our own definition of success while meeting ourselves with love and a playful curiosity. My goal is to provide practical tools and fresh perspectives so you can rewrite your story, start living your life on purpose, and ultimately become more freely you. Well, hello and welcome back. So first of all, I have to just say that I am so proud of you for pressing play on this episode, because I think that this is one of those topics that it's easy to see and be like, yeah, I got it. Like, I don't foresee this being an earth-shattering conversation. I understand that, I need to be more responsive versus more reactive. And it is a really simple concept, but I think a lot of us need to put this into practice. And so what I want to chat with you about today are really the areas in your life where you are maybe not super happy with the way that you show up or the way that you are reacting to other people, other situations, and what we can do to interrupt that pattern and to shift your mindset and help you show up in a way that is more responsive versus being in a constant state of reactivity. And this is something that I personally have done a lot of work around, specifically in motherhood. I will not lie. I think that, when my kids were infants, I didn't think this was going to be a problem for me, honestly, because they were just so cute and squishy and cuddly, and they don't talk back. And it was really when they became toddlers and started, using their voice and advocating for themselves and having very big opinions about everything, and also very big emotions, depending on if they were hungry or tired or just, feeling big feelings that day. And what I found in myself is that I was meeting them wherever they were at. So if they were, panicked, or if they were yelling at me, I'd find myself yelling at them. And I discovered very quickly that that was not the kind of mother that I wanted to be. And I knew that. And I knew that growing up in a household that was reactive and explosive in that way, I knew that that was the exact opposite of the parent that I wanted to be. And so this was actually where really a huge part of my personal self-discovery work started, was talking to somebody about this and how to navigate this. And what I wasn't told at that time is that it really was as simple as changing my reaction. And I want to, before we dive into this, so the point of this episode is to give you one simple question that you can ask yourself when you find yourself in a state of reactivity, but also to really start identifying, where am I being reactive in my life? Because it is a trickle effect, okay? So if we start being reactive to one area of our lives, a lot of times we become heightened, our nervous system is out of whack, we're in this constant state of reactivity, and then we start seeing that show up in other areas of our lives. Now, when we think about a reaction, we often think about like this big, explosive reaction, right? It's like this immediate response. But that is not always the case for all of us. And I know for me, one of my biggest reactions is to shut down. When there's conflict, when I feel intimidated, when I feel like I'm not being heard, my go-to for a very long time was just to shut down completely. And so I want to also talk to you about the different ways that we do react. That's not just that knee-jerk instant like explosion. So I think it's really important to understand, okay, we're talking about a reaction versus a response. Like, what does that actually look like? What's the difference? Because they sound very similar. But I would think of a reaction as that initial, like, knee-jerk reaction, right? So something happens, the ball drops, and then we immediately react. Most of the time, our reactions are taking place in our subconscious mind. It is our programming. It's without us even thinking, it's wherever our body goes. And so when we're reacting, a lot of times we do have that immediate expression. It can be very emotionally driven. For many a times, our ego takes over. We get very defensive. We don't look at the situation in its entirety. We only see what's right in front of us, the thing that is heightening us in that moment. And there's a trigger, and it's followed by an immediate reaction. Okay, so that is what is happening when we are reacting. Now, when we're responding, we're actually looking at the situation in our conscious mind. Okay, so we're taking a minute, we're stepping back, we're not just going into the program, we are actually creating our own response. So we're looking at the entire situation, not just a piece of it. We're looking at the big picture. We're remaining in control of our big emotions and our ego and our defensiveness and all the things. We're more willing to compromise in this state. We are actually utilizing our emotional intelligence, and we're looking at the long term. We're not just looking at what's happening now. We're looking at the whole situation. And when we see a trigger, when something triggers us, we can call it as it is and recognize that we are being triggered. That alone is a game changer, okay? Because for most of us, the triggers that we're experiencing in our lives, the thing that causes us to react, it's generally the same thing that's happening over and over again. And it's not just, I mentioned motherhood, but this comes into play in all of our relationships, in our careers. This is something that we're dealing with all day long. I mean, even like driving on the highway and somebody cuts you off, a lot of us go to immediate reaction. And so when we are in this state of reactivity, what it is our nervous system is heightened. And so I'm sure you've heard, or I know I've said it on the show, we've talked about it here, but when we have a stress response, and a lot of times these are classified as trauma responses, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, but really those reactions are a stress response. So it can be anything that heightens us. We generally will go to one of these reactions. It's immediate, right? Something happens, there's a trigger. Our heart rate increases, our pupils dilate, maybe we start sweating, our palms get clammy. Like, we are immediately physically heightened. And when we're in that stage, we choose to either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so when we're fighting, that is that immediate explosion, right? We're combative, we're feeling threatened. A lot of times we're raising our voice. We have a need for control. We're very defensive. When we're in that state of flight, we're feeling scared or anxious or avoidant. A lot of times we just want to run away from the situation, pretend that it's not happening. We often procrastinate to put off actually looking at the things that we need to do, the hard situations. And we really withdraw ourselves emotionally from whatever's happening. That was a big one for me too. Or we can freeze. And when we freeze, we're feeling helpless. We feel overwhelmed. This is when we shut down a lot. A lot of times we zone out. Maybe we have a habit of numbing out. We tend to isolate ourselves, spend more time on our own, like just, again, that avoidance of the situation. And then for some of us, we go into this fawn mode. And this is where we get into those people-pleasing tendency. We don't have a lot of boundaries. We can't speak up for ourselves. And we're really just trying to appease the situation, right? We're just like, oh my God, problem. Let's just not rock the boat. Let's just let it be. And so the reason that I want to share that with you is because I think that it's easy to think like I'm not reactive because I'm not having these big explosions. No, our reaction is anything that is programmed, anything that is an immediate response without us even thinking. And so that can look very different. That can look like shutting down. That can look like people pleasing. That can look like just feeling overwhelmed or stuck or completely avoiding the situation altogether. So where in your life, where are the areas where you are finding yourself in a state of reactivity? And once we can identify those areas, that's when we can start to change it. And this is not like, here's the thing about these reactions that we're having. These are actually put into place to protect us. So a lot of the learned behavior that we have is learned that as a coping mechanism. We have chosen this as a coping mechanism because at some point in our lives, this kept us safe, right? And so that is our immediate reaction, is to go into, when we feel heightened, we feel stressed, we feel panicked, it's to go into that mode that's going to essentially save us. And sometimes that looks like yelling, sometimes that looks like shutting down. So the tricky part about our reactions is that for most of us, we've been doing it for so long that we have actually perfected it, that we have it so dialed in that we don't even think about it. So when you can get clear on, okay, where are the places in my life that I am reacting immediately, whatever that looks like for you, and the question that you can ask yourself is, am I reacting or am I responding right now? If I were to respond versus react, what would that look like? Now, this isn't a perfect, this is not a one and done thing. You're not going to just ask yourself this once and then you're going to be, completely cured of reacting forever. It is totally a practice. You have to do this over and over again. And what I found is that most of the time I'm still experiencing the trigger. And sometimes, even to this day, sometimes I still react, but I catch myself at the initial reaction. So it's like the kid talks back and immediately I'm like, oh no, heightened, right? But it's recognizing, okay, that was a trigger for me. And now how can I respond? And a lot of times all that looks like is taking a deep breath and thinking how can I show up in a way that's going to make me feel proud in this moment? What would be a better response than just to yell or to lose it? The husband makes the comment. He says the thing that he always says that drives you insane. That's the trigger. Can you recognize the trigger for what it is, but then can you choose a different response versus your go-to reaction? You're sitting at your desk at work and the boss comes over and they ask you about that thing that they told you is due on Friday and it's only Tuesday, and you're immediately just heightened and why are they always doing this? Why are they always on me? Why don't they tell me when the due date is? Why are they asking about this today? And it's that immediate, we want to react. Can you take a deep breath? Can you choose a response versus a reaction? Something that you would be proud of. I saw this quote and it said, a response is a reaction rooted in mindfulness. And this just stuck with me, because when we are mindful, we're aware of the way that we're showing up. We're aware of what's happening around us. We're aware of what's happening in our body. We can sense that we are being triggered. We can sense that we're going back to Old Faithful as a coping mechanism. We can sense that all this is coming because we're mindful of what's happening in our mind and in our body. So it's not groundbreaking to choose a response over a reaction, but when we've been conditioned to have the same reaction for so long, And whether that was modeled for you as a child, whether that was something that you developed as a coping mechanism to keep you safe, to avoid conflict, whether it's a learned behavior, something that you've seen that worked for somebody else, and then you decided to try it on for size, and now it's just how you are. It's not that it's so challenging to choose a response, but it does require us to be mindful. It requires us to take ownership of the way that we are reacting to the situations and the people in our lives. So that's the question to ask yourself. Am I responding or reacting right now? If I were to choose a response, what would that look like? Because here's the thing. If we are constantly in a state of reactivity, it's like the domino effect. So it's like you wake up, you stub your toe, right? And you're immediately just heightened. And then you go and you're pouring your coffee and you spill your coffee. And then you get on the highway and the guy cuts you off. And then you get into work and it's just like one thing after another. And we're in this constant heightened state of reactivity. That is a real thing that's happening. That is not you having a bad day. That is you being heightened in your nervous system. That is your nervous system in that stress mode. It is reacting to everything that's happening around you. And if you live your life like that, if that is how your day-to-day works, one thing goes wrong and you're immediately triggered and now you're heightened and now you're going throughout your day reacting to everything rather than responding, that's when we feel like things are out of control. That's when we feel unsettled and anxious and like things are just happening to us. And in a very real way, they are, because we're not making a conscious effort. We're not making these decisions in our conscious mind. We're letting our subconscious programming, even if that is something that doesn't align with who we are now and what we want now, we're letting that run the show, and we're becoming a victim to that, as well as everybody else in our lives. So if you can start identifying your triggers and identifying what your current reactions are, and really think about that and sit with that, because is it one of those fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses? Is that the way that you are reacting to certain scenarios in your life? And if that's not serving you, if that's not giving you the results that you want, then it's time to start responding versus reacting. And that is when we actually are taking ownership, we are taking control. And honestly, that's when we're showing up so much more intentionally to our lives, right? When we are choosing mindfulness, when we are choosing responsiveness, that is us being intentional about the way that we want to show up. That is us being mindful about what is happening in our body, about when our nervous system is out of whack, when it's shutting down, when it's going back to one of those learned responses. And so really, like everything, it's our awareness, but then it's our ability to dial that in and to really hone in on it and decide, is this a reaction or a response? And if I were responding right now, what would that look like? What would be different about this scenario? So yes, this is a very simple concept, but we do have to put it into practice. We have to be able to identify our triggers. We have to be able to recognize when we are reacting versus when we are responding. And then we have to take the time to ask ourselves, what would our response look like? Am I reacting right now? And what would a mindful response look like? This is a game changer. So yes, keep it simple, but really try to look at this as you go throughout your day and start choosing to be responsive rather than reactive. And watch how much better you feel in your mind, in your body, in your relationships, in your career, in all the areas of your life where your programming is actually the thing that's making you feel overwhelmed, stuck, heightened, all the things. It's a game changer. You guys, thank you so much for being here today. You actually have no idea just how much it means to me. If you enjoyed this episode or believe in my mission, can you do me a solid and leave me a review, follow, or share this podcast? It would be so greatly appreciated. Also, if you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram at freely Sarah Heredia. Sending you so much love, and I'll be talking to you soon.